you're probably going to see making an impact. We know on defense, but definitely I would say on special teams for South Carolina as well under Joe D as he takes over for Pete Limbo.
Well, you get Joe D, who was NFL special teams coach, I think, for 77 years. So you got a guy who was in the league coaching special teams. And you have Demetrius Knight, and again, talking about looking at the big picture, he knows that, there could be a chance if you want to go play in the NFL, at least in the beginning, you're going to have to go play teams. So you embrace it now, help out on the special teams at South Carolina, and like we were talking about defensively. Then when you get to the NFL, you've checked that box. Oh, I play teams, man. I'm good. Let's go. And he might develop into a rotational linebacker, starting linebacker, whatever in the next level. But in the NFL, this is a guy that not only plays it, but embraces special teams.
He does. And he's got all he checks all the boxes that you look for in a special teams player. I mean, one of the other things that Hunter told us, Hunter Rogers, long snapper on Tuesday's Garnet Trust Hour, said, hey, kind of what were some of the problems last season that made the special teams not as consistent as you guys would have wanted? And he actually mentioned the depth, because you start looking, offensive linemen play special teams. I don't think people think about that as much, but they obviously do. It's still blocking and tackling is a big part of it. And so when you've got 9 or 10 injuries on the O-line, that can bleed into your special teams. When you don't have as much depth at, spots like DB or receiver or linebacker, the body types, special teams, you need a bunch of guys to go run and cover down the field. Those are the body types that you're looking for: tight end, running back, receiver, DB, linebacker. You look out there typically on a lot of special teams plays, and you're going to see some linebackers barreling down the field. And so with Knight, 245, which is hard to believe, and even harder to believe
he carries it very well. Even
harder to believe that he can run 21 miles an hour at that size. That is tailor-made to go be a special teams player, especially with his IQ and his experience level.
He doesn't look 245.
No, he carries it very, very, very well. We
were outside just shooting the crap with him there before he left. You look at him, you don't go, wow, that dude's almost carting 250. Not at all. The other thing about just the linebacker room, big picture, guys, is again, a spring game. You don't make too much of a spring game because it's a spring game. It's vanilla. But the one thing I notice is it seems to be, and you guys dig into it more than anybody, there's a lot more athleticism in that linebacker room. Much more ability for guys not only to go sideline to sideline, but when they go to gap responsibility, they're coming with a lot more athleticism and quickness than we've seen the last couple of years. Because against the run, we always say if you're having trouble against the run, okay, it's automatically your defensive line. Well, everybody goes right there. Now, sometimes it's your linebackers. They're not hitting the correct gap, or they're not getting there quick enough, or they're not filling, or whatever the case. I feel like this is a much more athletic room now that can make some of those havoc plays that we all scream and yell about.
Yeah, well, and when they lost a couple of guys to the portal, that was the priority. They said, and we instantly heard, the priority right now is to add speed and athleticism. And that's exactly what they did with Knight and with Gali Kamara. So I think you look at the overall depth there, not to mention you add in Wendell Gregory, J.R. Johnson, two guys who have come in and been really good for freshmen as well. I think J.R. Johnson is a guy who is going to surprise a lot of people already this year. And I think if you're Clayton White, you were sort of looking at that position saying, man, we lost a starter, we lost a key backup, but we actually probably got better overall, frankly, and that's not a shot at guys who left, but just when you bring in a couple of athletic veterans, it matters. And I think ideally you'd like to be in a position where you are getting guys like Gregory and J.R. Johnson, and you're developing them and you're keeping them. Like they didn't want Pup Howard to leave. They wanted him to stick around, develop, and get better. But once those guys do leave, the portal is there. You might as well take advantage of it. And I think you got to go get the right guys, too. You got to get guys that are made of the right stuff. And, I mean, I don't know if you can always feel comfortable that I know someone after having one conversation with them. But you have one conversation with Demetrius Knight, and you're like, okay, this guy's made of the right stuff. Like, you would never once worry about that guy being a locker room issue, an off-the-field issue, or anything like that. So I do think when you're bringing in guys from the portal, you got to be careful because it moves so fast, right? It's not like high school where you evaluate a guy for months on end. I mean, this thing is moving quick, and guys want offers right off the bat. So you've got to be careful. But Knight, I think, gives you complete confidence that you got the right type of person.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, in the portal, even in the 30-day, the longer window where, you know, the one that Knight and Kamara and a bunch of other guys committed in, you can't say, you know, okay, this guy's in the portal. Guys, let's do a full workup on this guy. Let's see what he's all about. By that time, I mean, the kid's probably already committed somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can't take a week to evaluate a guy. You're way too late at that point, especially as we know the transfer process is, you know, on steroids from even what high school recruiting is. It's so quick now. You know, and Rick Barnes actually had a great quote, I think this morning or yesterday, about, you know, Jonas Adu left the Tennessee program. He's going to go to Arkansas, and he was asked about it, and he's like, I mean, I don't mean to be crass, but, like, if a guy leaves, he leaves, and you try to take that opportunity to say, maybe we can get better in some areas. That's what you've done with linebacker. You lose a couple guys who were going to play for you. You looked at it and say, well, what is your options? Go get a couple replacements and try to take the opportunity to see if you can get better. And I really think they did really well at that spot this offseason.
Speaking of portal, let's come back and talk more transfer portal. Never get enough of that. It's a Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, hanging out here till noon on the game. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Terry Ford hanging in for Tyler. Chris, Wes, they're here as we roll till noon here on the game. All right, so help me out. One Scully left. How are we in the scholarship dance? How are we doing here? One scholarship left for football?
You could, if you can't tell, if you're not watching the stream, Wes and I have no idea how many scholarships.
Terry, we don't deal in scholarships anymore.
Yeah.
Have you stopped the scholarship dance?
Stop the count. No, so here's the thing. It used to be that was a question we got a lot.
Right.
Now there's always a scholarship somewhere.
Everybody's like, there'll be a team and there'll be.
Well, can't you always find one if you know what I'm saying?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
However, I will say this. At this point, I mean, there is no portal. There's no portal window.
Right, it's all
left.
shut. Everything's shut.
So unless somebody got in that we haven't heard about, like at the buzzer, and it hasn't been announced yet, which I haven't heard anything on that.
Nope.
Then that number should be the number.
Tyler Head's favorite feature on Gamecock Central, the scholarship breakdown.
Yeah, what's the number?
According to this, and it looks like our guy Brian Shoemaker has updated it because it's got Vandrevius Jacobs and Dale Von Campbell. 85.
Well, there you go.
Now, we've also heard that, hey, if they could get, say, an offensive lineman from the portal, they would have taken. Because, again, guys don't have to
They will take, potentially.
in that window. They will take. So, how does that work? I don't know. We'll find out. It cross that bridge when you get to it type of thing. But right now, they're pretty full. They're not going to add 10 guys from the portal that happen to be chilling in the portal. Like, we are at the tail end, if not the end of this thing.
Yeah.
Makes sense. We're good. All right, so we figured that out, right?
Well,
right now.
to an extent.
11:22 on Thursday morning, we figured it out for right now.
Yeah, you can't say it's done though.
Because there could be one floating out there to that point.
You're close to done, and you might be done, but it's not certain.
I do. I mean, you go back to what Shane Beamer said. He said, we want to add receiver depth. We want to add O-line depth, potentially. And that meant if the right guy's out there. Mm-hmm. And this has been a notorious thing. Everybody is trying to add O-line help.
Right.
Like everybody in the country. And everybody's trying to add offensive tackles, to be specific. And as Chris and I have talked about, those guys are hard to find. Like, if you are a future NFL left tackle, you're not chilling in the portal in May. You're just not. Nope. And so, and if you are, there's some other reason involved. And sometimes, maybe it's a coach left or something like that. But for the most part, these guys are so highly valued that if you're an upper echelon left tackle, then either you're already going to the NFL and you got drafted last week, or your team, your collective, your booster, you're being taken care of. Like, they're not letting you leave, basically. So those guys are really, really hard to find. I think Beamer used the word kind of depth and pointed to the overall numbers. With wide receiver, that was a little bit more skewed towards we want guys to come in and compete for a starting spot. For O-line, if we're just being realistic, I think that would be more, if they did add a late guy, it's probably not going to be some huge name necessarily that fans just say, oh, that guy's our starting left tackle. It may be more along the lines potentially of, here's a guy who can come in and help fill out the depth.
Yeah, it's something in between, and this actually makes it even harder to find, I think. It's something between taking a warm body out of the portal and having to feel like, okay, we got to go get a starter at this spot. Because, again, that's hard out of the portal in general, because if there's a really good starter who's SEC level, everybody's going to want him. But then you move that over to, like, okay, left tackle. That becomes almost impossible to find a starter. So you kind of have to thread that needle of, can we get a guy that has played somewhere or has started some, or, maybe things didn't go well at his last spot, but he's got some upside, but we don't have to count
All right. Yeah, that was weird. That was weird. You kept talking, but you didn't. It's kind of strange. It's a little weird. It's still. Oh, hell. You broke that. That's what happened. You broke the microphone.
Normally it's Terry breaking the cameras and breaking our spirit by stealing our Firehouse subs.
Right.
But
hey, you know what? That was just, a lack of understanding of the sub etiquette. That's what that was. The lack of understanding of the subculture that I'm not typically a part of. So I will take ignorance.
We'll continue to teach you.
You guys have to be my Mr. Miyagi in the subculture.
We'll help.
We'll
help.
Get me up to speed.
By the way, big picture though, real quick, back to the portal. Do y'all feel like the spring window is like little brother compared to the other?
Oh yeah,
window?
Absolutely.
Like the other window, man, was like watching the NBA offseason where you got like Woj bombs and people are more interested. It's something Chris and I talk about fairly often from like a media standpoint. We feel like people are more interested in the NBA and following the transactions than the actual games sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that.
And the portal, people love to be like, I hate the portal. The portal stinks. This is killing college football. And then we look at our numbers. I'm like, y'all sure are reading about the portal a lot. These numbers say differently. This portal window, a little bit more, like you didn't have starting quarterbacks just from Power 5 schools hopping in there on day one like you did the other one.
I think we have a baseline of maybe what to expect. Now, they'll probably change something to where it'll be crazy next year. Like if they take away the SEC to SEC kind of restriction of having to sit out. But, it was a little bit almost disappointing, like from just an entertainment standpoint, because you remember leading up to it, oh, man, spring portal window is going to be insane. There's going to be a lot of crazy stuff that happens. And maybe that was originally going to happen, and then collectives, or coaches kind of caught wind of that, and they were able to dial some of that back. I think that actually probably played a pretty big part in it.
And what would you say the biggest name quarterback was? Rashada in the portal in the spring? Was there anybody else with that kind of cachet? And he's done nothing on the field. It was off the field stuff that makes him polarizing. Would that be the guy? Can you think of another one?
Are we missing anybody else? That's probably and that was a big story just because it was like he entered the portal. ... 5 minutes later, hey, we're hearing Georgia has emerged as a favorite.
Emerged. Very quickly emerged.
What recruiting pitch did they give him in 5 minutes?
A school to watch.
That's how good Georgia is.
Yeah.
That's how good they are.
Yeah. So, and after, from a South Carolina standpoint, after Georgia just got Ryan Montgomery, South Carolina quarterback target committed.
Yeah.
It's like some interesting timing going on here.
All right. Now, speaking of my lack of sub etiquette, let's talk about our favorite place to eat subs, Firehouse Subs.
Yeah, Firehouse Subs. You can go to any of the 14 Midlands locations around you. And heck, they got locations all around the state. If you have not had the new barbecue Cuban that Terry stole,
Which we haven't. I haven't.
I had it. It was great, by the
other
way.
two in here had it.
Terry had the whole thing.
Southern Roots with the Cuban twist. If you order a large barbecue Cuban, which I recommend if you have a group, and if you have 4 people that are going to eat it and you cut it in fourths like our friends did, each person gets 1. That's how that math works. Southern Roots with the Cuban twist. Use the Rapid Rescue to go to avoid the wait and order online. Again, there's a Firehouse Subs near you, no matter where you are in the state. Lunch, dinner, catering. Earn yourself some rewards towards future purchases by downloading the app or going to firehousesubs.com.
All right, we'll get back in here. Continue a little portal talk, and there was a baseball game last night played over at Founders. Has the Gamecocks gotten over the hump? We'll get into all that coming back. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Chris and Wes and Terry Ford hanging out for Tyler. We roll till noon on the game. All right, what we're talking about is this. You're going to hear it in a second. Have we got it yet? Gamecock victory over East Tennessee State. A dominant.
Well, great game for us, obviously. Not sure if I'm more impressed with our pitchers or our hitters tonight. It's great to know that they both were as good as they were. So that was a good team we played tonight. 27 wins coming in, hitting 320 plus. It was a really good team. And the fact that we won 15-2 and gave up 3 hits, had 14 ourselves, just thrilled with what that team looked like tonight.
All right, fellas, what were you more impressed with? Your run rule, East Tennessee State, a very good offensive team, by the way, was East Tennessee State. Your run rule, this squad, offensively, 4 homers, and again, this lineup seems to be cooking. Or are you more impressed with the pitching that held down a really good East Tennessee State? Which way do you go? Which one do you like more?
You know, I think the fact, first of all, Gamecock fans are just thrilled. I would think at this point that we can even have that conversation about which one was more impressive. This is not your typical midweek win. Coming in, ETSU 52 in the RPI, which tells you they've obviously played some good opponents and have kind of buoyed their strength of schedule there, but also they've won some games. This group was 20-5 at home, 7-10 on the road, and they've got some hitters top to bottom in this lineup. So I think it is impressive what the pitching staff was able to do. However, to answer the question, I go a little bit more towards the bats just because for a team that we really thought was going to be led by the hitting coming into this season, it's been very up and down. And now these last 4 games, basically, you've especially the last 3, you've gotten great performances at the plate. And guys, I'm gonna be completely honest. I didn't express this publicly, but when that lineup came out on Saturday, I was like, "What is this?" I was like, "They moved a first baseman to third base, a third baseman to shortstop." It's like this defensively could. Maybe is not the best recipe, but they actually not only have hit, but they've made the routine plays and then some more than routine plays. I'm still, as much as I love watching hitting, we all do, I'm still a little bit old school. You got to have great play up the middle at shortstop. Even Kingston himself had said, maybe we don't quite have the range at shortstop with this lineup that we did before, but I think for South Carolina, those guys have stepped up and actually played really good defense, while also this lineup just seems to have so much confidence at the plate. And now that you have this lineup, if you're Mark Kingston, if you're Monty Lee, you're like, don't touch it.
That's going to be my next question to you, Chris Clark. Will Tippett will be back at some point, and Tippett obviously better defensively than Lee Croy at short. Tippett also was starting to hit before he got hurt.
Yes, he was, yeah.
So Wes is like, don't touch this, man. Leave it alone. Where are you at with all that?
I think that's part of the game. You leave it where it's at. It happens, you think about football, which we talk about even more, I think Wes and I do. Sometimes that happens where you get an injury at a position, a guy goes in, and you just leave him in if it's working. Why? So, now will there be some opportunities down the road? Probably. Will there be? Maybe this thing, doesn't click as much as it has been clicking. Whether that's in a situation, whether it's in a game, whether you end up having to tweak it based on a couple game sample, and then you can revert to that, and you've got that option. But I think to go back to the original question too, I'm leaning more on you're happier about the hitting, because with the schedule South Carolina plays, what happened in Game 3 against Kentucky was incredible, right? That was fun because you run rule them, you score 10 runs, you look great hitting the ball, and you also goose egg them, which has literally not happened this entire season. But the point is, you don't go through this SEC schedule and count on, hey, we're going to shut this team out. You just don't do that against the teams that you have to play against. So, yeah, you need great pitching and hitting to win a bunch of games with the schedule South Carolina plays, but you got to have the bats come alive.
With the ups and downs South Carolina has had this year, it has meant what felt like a different lineup every single game for a stretch of this season. And that was not by design. That was, we have to keep tweaking this thing until we find the right combination. And South Carolina, I feel like at times also guys had depth in the outfield, but there was always this kind of question about, well, all right, what are the best three guys to actually have out there? And that's why you can have a guy like Austin Brindling who didn't really play a ton at all and now is a fixture at the top of your lineup. So as much as I cover football, baseball is the game I grew up playing, and I do think there's a certain mental comfort level to knowing I bat second, that guy bats before me, that guy bats after me, and I'm just comfortable. I'm settled in. I'm in the batter's box, or I'm on deck while that guy's hitting. And there's just a certain feel you get when you know exactly where you are in the order. And I'm not saying you can't tweak things, but in an ideal world, I feel like you stick to those things as much as possible. The beauty will be when Tippett comes back, like Chris says, if a guy starts slumping or something, you adjust on the fly. However, this will give you some options. You can go with one lineup early in a game. If you have a lead late, you can go a little bit more defensively to sort of offset that. But I think what we've seen right now, anytime in baseball you have momentum, you ride that wave as long and as far as it'll take you.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, Wes. And, everybody, consistency wins. That's all. You've got to be consistent in some way, shape. Like Dion at Colorado. You got to be consistent. And that just went right by everybody. You got to have some foundation where, like a fan, you go, yeah, dude, your job is to, wherever they put you, go play. And, yeah, we get that. But when you're playing and you know your role, you can better get prepared for your role. Going to the park or the field or the court, you know where you're playing, you know what you do. And there is a comfort level as a player in any sport about your role. And also, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. And this is real. Hey, Dave, go to cut 6 for me really quick. Mark Kingston talking about his improved offense. Very interesting thing that Kingston says here. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, it's much improved. You can point to a lot of different reasons, and I won't go into all of them tonight because I think it's just all of them. And I think some of it's personnel, some of it is preparation, some of it is confidence. There's a lot of different things, but right now it's the kind of offense that we hope to have going into the year. So just want to see it continue.
So it's finally there, right? It's where you guys were talking about envisioning it when the season started, a team that's being carried by its offense while it figures out its pitching.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about a lineup, sometimes it does get overblown just in terms of an actual batting order. Like if a guy's batting 8th versus 9th, does it really matter? It does get overblown to an extent, but I think even, especially if you're an Ethan Petrie, or if you're a Gavin Costas for that matter, who's batting 9th right now, where you are in the order, and specifically who is after you, or in some cases who's on base in front of you, determines how you get pitched. So I think if you're Costas, you're a 9th hole guy, and you hit, I think, 19 home runs last year. So you're in general, if you're at the more towards the bottom of the order, pitchers, I don't want to say they relax, but they're going to say, I don't want to walk the 9th hitter and feed the top of the lineup with guys on base. So maybe you see a few more pitches. If you're Petrie, they've been trying to pitch around you all year long. So can you provide a little bit more protection for him in this order as well? I feel like that's happened. And it just gives this lineup length, like top to bottom, even your non-power guys. Brindling, you talked about roles, he's doing his job in the top of this order.
All right, we'll come back, wrap this sucker up. We'll get back to a little bit more football, maybe some recruiting news, anything that's going on, the latest on the recruiting front. But first, you need TVs, you need media, you need sound systems, and all sorts of cool stuff if you're going to get into this world of watching sports. Where should I go, Wes?
Well, I tell you what, I'm gonna let Chris. I'll tell you, go to integrated media. But Chris is the guy who'll tell you all the details.
I'm even more of an integrated media expert.
He's jacked. Yes.
Well, they've been to Wes's home. They've been to my home. They can come out to yours, your home, or your business. They can do everything from mounting a TV, hiding all the wires, organizing everything, to a complete smart home solution. They can do security and cameras, audio, video. Make sure that your internet signal is strong throughout your home. Trick out that man cave, the patio area, home theater, anything that you want. Control all your devices from the touch of a button on your smartphone. IntegratedMediaInc.com or 803-948-8327.
And we'll get back in here, talk some football recruiting, maybe take a little bit look back on the transfer portal that seems to be shutting down for this cycle. We'll get into all the next Gamecocks, Gamecock. What the heck is this called again? Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Wes and Chris and me here on the game.
You're Terry.
Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Wes and Chris and Terry Ford hanging in for Tyler as we roll this baby up until noon here on the game. All right, before we get started on any recruiting news, and I want to ask you guys a transfer portal question now that seems like the transfer portal season is wrapped up. But first, there's some Garnet Trust info you guys want to get out.
Yeah, they Garnet Trust just announced that they have maxed the match. There you go. The latest campaign match program they had going, and Chris essentially, yeah, I said that backwards again. But May 1st, 5 p.m. was the deadline at the buzzer. That means $1 million total.
Yep.
To South Carolina basketball. So half of that, $500,000 each to South Carolina women's, South Carolina men's basketball, which it could be helpful, I would say.
That could be very helpful. You know, you got, no matter, we say it all the time, no matter what you think of it, 2024, you got to have it in recruiting to be able to attract talent, retain that talent. You got to be in a great position NIL-wise because others are as well. And, you know, Dawn Staley and Lamont Paris have both done obviously great things, whether it's portal recruiting, high school recruiting, and they both had great seasons, obviously. And so the momentum has continued. So Gamecock fans deserve a shout-out, obviously, for doing their part on that and contributing to that. They've helped max out a couple of the Garnet Trust matches here recently. So good stuff.
It's a crazy world, and it's going to get crazier. So NILs, it's just like, and you said hit a perfect, Chris. Doesn't matter if you like it or not.
It's here.
It's a thing, and you got to do it. Sort of like, remember that nasty medicine we all drink as kids? It's supposed to be like cherry flavored, and it tasted awful. You got to take it, right? That's the world we live in now. If you want to compete with everybody else, you got to jump your NIL game. Real quick, guys, any recruiting news or nuggets that we need to hear about before we take off today?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to say it's quiet in football because it never is. Coaching staff right now is on the road, so this is a time period. A lot of times during the spring, during spring practice, you heard, hey, this prospect's on campus, this prospect is visiting. It reverses a little bit right now. So South Carolina's assistant coaching staff, they are visiting high schools, visiting with prospects right now. So nothing groundbreaking coming from that, but that is sort of the time on the calendar for those guys. And then speaking of portal, for men's basketball, we don't have exact names to watch yet, but they are still obviously looking for a guard prospect out there.
Point guard, yep.
They're looking for essentially that Talon Cooper replacement, whether that means a similar skill set or a little bit different. That's sort of that is the priority right now for them. They got Nick Pringle, of course. They got Jordan Butler, so they hit on kind of their two big spots. Now, you basically complete the roster when you add a point guard. There are several point guards from around the country I saw that kind of got in at the buzzer that went into the portal. I think South Carolina will be, as they have been, they'll be deliberate about who they go after. It's not just kind of throw out 5 offers and see who calls back first. It's deliberate. It's here's who we want. And I'd imagine pretty soon we're going to have a much better idea about what that spot might look like.
Yeah, that's the kind of one missing piece, right? You can see how they've put things together. You could see it last year in the portal, and there's a little bit more of an unknown because, people just weren't familiar. And now you've seen that product. Now you see kind of what they need this offseason, and I think they've checked those boxes. You haven't directly replaced – you haven't replaced Cooper yet, of course, at all. That's still on the docket. You haven't gotten a straight B.J. Mack replacement, a straight Michie Johnson replacement, but you have brought in guys that play those positions, and you can kind of see how I think that this roster could end up being constructed, but that last piece is a guard.
All right. Wes Mitchell, you're the expert finally on this show
Yes.
today. Let's talk some roofing, my friend.
Yeah, I'm not the expert, but I can tell you who to call that are experts. That's my friends Joe Reeder, Max Sawyer. They're probably driving around, going to different sites right now. Call them right now, 803-590-7870, or head on over to classicroofingsc.com. You're going to want to make sure to take care of your roof. It is by far one of the biggest, most important parts of your house. Let them come out, do a free estimate, and give you a complete evaluation of where your roof is right now. 803-590-7870.
All right, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Good hanging out with you guys. Chris West, Terry Ford in for Tyler. We'll come back. Halftime show is next here on the game.